Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we're going to have a look at a data mine for Battle Pass Season 6. Obviously with the last season finishing on the 26th, the season after will probably start on the 27th next Thursday, meaning that all the stuff will be added to the game and we get to see some preliminary stats on some of the vehicles and also some of the extra stuff, maybe giving us a hint on what we'll see when it comes to themes for this Battle Pass. To be honest with you, when we have a look at this Battle Pass, the theme itself doesn't seem like it really symbolizes anything. It seems more just random, which kind of sucks, but maybe you'll be able to get something out of it where I have failed. So we'll have a look at the vehicles, we'll have a look at the decals, and also the decorators and the avatar, which is present for it as well. And once again, thank you to Zabby for giving us this information. It is a wonderful thing that Zabby does for the community, and I'll make sure to leave a link in the description if you want to see the raw stuff yourself, and also at the same time, thanks Zabby for what he does. Let's get into it. Now the first vehicle that has been added to the files is the SU8 that you can see here. Now the SU8 is coming in at rank 4. It's going to be a premium, as we talked about, and also it's going to have a pretty low repair cost of 1519 RB. So following a lot of main Battle Pass vehicles, just being incredibly low when it comes to general repair cost. Also at the same time, it has access to 445mm that you can see here in the center of the vehicle, right underneath the cockpit, which I don't think is actually fully modeled right now. This is the cockpit version of the SU8, so I'm guessing it's just going to have a cheap cockpit. It's not going to have anything fancy in it, being a attacker, but the 45 should be very, very fun to use. It also is backed up by 8 7.62mm chassis, so it actually has 4 in each wing, so you can see like 4 here, and then on the other side it also has 4. So you're not just going to be limited to the 45s, you're also going to have some chassis as well. And then it has 2 turrets, one in the top and one in the bottom, very similar to normal Soviet style stuff. So these have 12.7mm UBTs in them, so good old Berezins, the 12.7mm. So yeah, you won't just get these as a decoration, you'll also get these in the plane itself. It can carry all the different rockets and bombs that late war Soviet machines could carry, so RS-82s, RS-132s, RBS-82s, and RBS-132s. When it comes to the rockets, you can see here are the mounts for them. It should be able to carry 10, 5 on each of the wings. There's 5 there, and then also 5 here. And then when it comes to bombs, it could carry 100, 250, or 500 kilo bombs. And all of the mountings are in the center here that you can see on the aircraft. I don't think it has an internal bomb bay, because that's taken up by, of course, the massive guns on this thing. So that would be something to think about, but I find this really odd that this machine is going to be a machine which is 4/7. I feel like they're not putting a lot of faith in this thing right now, which, you know, maybe the engine power or the flight characteristics is a little bit rough on it, but when you compare it to other stuff which are around that BR, like the PE2s, this thing just wipes the floor with them, so it seems a little bit odd. I thought this thing would be more around 5.3 or 5.7 to contend with the TU2, giving a different playstyle depending on what you wanted to play. But hey ho, we'll have to see what goes on with it. It's a pretty cool aircraft though, lovely to see it. As a main Battle Pass vehicle though, maybe not. I see this more of a normal event vehicle than a Battle Pass one, but it's still really interesting. The boat is also in for the Battle Pass. This is the MTB 422. This is going to be a British coastal fleet boat. It's basically, as we talked about, a Higgins boat. It's actually even in the files labeled as the Higgins 78-footer MTB 422. Obviously, this is a Lend-Lease vehicle that was meant to go to the Soviet Union, but instead ended up in British hands. So what this machine has, it has access to a 40mm, and as you can see, looks like a very similar one to the Bofors, which is quite nice. It's known as the ROQF Mark III. I couldn't actually find this on any vehicle in-game, but there's a lot of vehicles which have very similar guns to this, and they're generally very powerful, very good fire rate, and very good good around 2 kilometers to be able to annihilate stuff. When it comes to secondary weapons, it has a 20mm in the center of the vehicle that you can see here, and then also has access to 4 12.7s on the front of it, which will be used for AA support and also going after some smaller ships. You can see the actual mounts that these have are really cool. You can see that they actually model all of the bullets as well, and also they'll have the guys in it as well. It also has 2 torpedoes, so these are 21-inch Mark 9B torpedoes that'll have, so it's generally is less armed than some of its compatriots when it comes to the American side of things, and because of that, it's actually going to be sat at 2.3. So this is actually quite low for a rank 3 machine. I thought it would be a little bit higher than that, maybe 2.7, but I'm guessing they're comparing it to the Higgins boats from the Americans, which are very similar to this, just more armed. So that's why it gets the 2.3. It also has 16 crew, so survivability is going to be really low on this thing, and that's the general thing you see from these machines. And you can see right here where everything is. You've got the bridge, radio station, you got a ton of ammo in the front as well, plus the tri-engines that they have set up here, and also some more ammo and stuff in the back. So this thing should pop like a canary. I'm kind of surprised how much stuff it has in the front of it here. Normally you don't see that much, but everything else seems a little bit normal for it. Hopefully it doesn't get exploded too easily like the S-100, which has the same issue with a ton of ammo in the front. Then you've got the Type 64, which is obviously the Chinese vehicle which is coming for this battle pass. It's actually known as the TL-64, but in the files it's labeled as the Type 64. This is a Hellcat turret, which is been put on top of an M42 Duster in a kind of a Frankensteinian way, which I think is pretty fun. Basically, the Taiwanese had a ton of Hellcats and a ton of M42s, and they didn't, or basically they ran out of parts to be able to keep repairing their Hellcats and keep them in service. So they're like, okay, well, we still have a bunch of turrets, we still have a bunch of the guns, and why not just marry them to the M42, which we can keep in service. So that's pretty much what they did here when it comes to the overall vehicle. It's going to be a rank 3, once again premium like the rest of them, and also at the same time has a pretty low repair cost of 1160, and in RB is sat at 5.7. So this is actually the same BR as the standard Hellcat, which you'll find in the American tech tree and also the Chinese tech tree in a really banger lineup. So if this actually adds to that 5.7 lineup, then that would be really, really nice. Because the 5.7 lineup for China is already incredibly good. This one will just make it better. It does have an additional 30 cal on it, so it has the 50 cal for the commander, and then a 30 cal for more kind of the gunner or the loader, who is on the other side on this very interesting mount, which is kind of sat here. So probably will be very much stationary. Should have some movement upwards though, when it comes to its use. And it's also an AB-47 and a simulator 47 as well, which is really surprising. You can see from the x-ray, it keeps the ammunition in the turret next to the loader. So this is your ready rack. You have a ready rack of, what is that, 4, 8, 9 rounds, which will be completely fine. Also, the breech for some reason is turned diagonally. Don't really know why it's doing that, but it is like that. It does have a 5-man crew, obviously being the Duster, some ammo in the back, and obviously the engine system. It'll be interesting to see how fast this vehicle is compared to others, such as the Hellcat, because generally what you find with this vehicle is it's heavier, but it also has a little bit more horsepower. So we'll have to see if it's as maneuverable as the Hellcat. My guess is it'll be quite similar to it. So it'll just be a nice addition. I'm looking forward to this one. Another thing is it also does get APCR, so that's something that it gets, but it only gets 25 rounds over the standard 45 of the Hellcat. And then we have the vehicle that I think I've seen the most interest for, which is pretty interesting. This is the Turan II, the 41M Turan II. This is going to be in the Italian tech tree. It is of Hungarian descent and will be a premium with a really low repair cost of 280 in realistic. And one of the things to also note is this thing is coming in at a BR of 2.0. Now remember, BRs are subject to change, but I thought this thing would be a little bit higher than this, but they're basically rating this at the same level as a Panzer IV F1, which obviously isn't great, and this is one of the better versions of the Turan as well. You can see that it has some very interesting setups when it comes to its guns, obviously a bunch of interesting ports down here, and also up here. They really wanted to add some additional weight to the machine gun instead of what other nations did. Has a kind of interesting optical port here, which looks like it has a hole in it, so you'll be able to shoot straight into it, but as you can see, there's just a literal hole to the outside there. But you can see the machine gun modeled in the bottom here. You also have the driver's position and also the machine gun here as well. So there is the driver's port, what you'll be able to see going out of it. It does have this additional armor on the side of it, which will help it against heat and other stuff like that. It does have a 5-man crew, which will be really nice for it. You can see they're quite cramped in though. It's definitely not, it's definitely a bit snug as a bug in a rug when it comes to the vehicle. Also, ammunition is just placed all over this thing. So at the back, at the sides, and also in the front of the turret. So that's going to be pretty rough for it. It's going to explode. There's even some on the feet. So got to be careful of that. And then also at the same time, when it comes to the gun itself, what it is the 75mm it's the 75mm 41M, and this as a gun is quite similar to the 75mm KWK-37 on the Panzer IV. It has the same rate of fire, but the APC-BC is lighter. It's 5.2 kilos instead of 6.78. It is faster, so it has a higher muzzle velocity of 400 meters per second compared to 385. The HE is also lighter by about 0.5 kilos and also faster by 30 meters per second, but also has a lot less explosive mass in it. It has 400 grams instead of 686. The heat itself, that is probably going to be the main ammunition that you use on this thing. It actually is a copy-paste of the HLGR-38C, which is the same as the Panzer IV one. But also, it has only 90 millimeters of penetration instead of the 100 millimeter, which the one that it's copied off has. I wonder if this is down to muzzle velocity, or it's just down to the fact that it probably will get changed at some point. Also, there is no smoke shell available for this thing, but it should actually get smoke grenades, if I remember correctly, from somewhere. I might be wrong about that one though. But I'm sure at some point it should have that, but I don't see any modeled on the vehicle anywhere, so that might not be the case in general. The vehicle itself is quite heavy, but it also has a 260 horsepower engine, which should mean it can motor around, so that's pretty nice for it. But overall, it's a 2.0 vehicle for Hungary, and I hope the Hungarians are happy with this. It's really nice to see it, and hopefully a lot of people will get it and have fun with it. There's also some new decals for this Battle Pass, and all of them are actually pretty nice. They all are for different nations. We've got one for the Germans, one for the Australians, one for the Americans, and one for the Soviets as well, since it seems like the main prize is for the Soviets. The first one is for, well, it's labeled Ger 2nd STG Immelmann, and this is actually for the Sturzkampfgeschwader 2, which is a Luftwaffe dive bombing wing, which was in the Second World War. It was active between 1939 and 1943, and obviously what they used were Ju-87s, being a dive bomber squadron. They have a pretty simple insignia, and also at the same time they actually were in obviously Poland, Western Europe. They were part of the Battle of Britain, even in North Africa, and of course Operation Barbarossa, and even stuff like the invasion of Crete. These guys were all over the place until 1943, and then after the Summer Offensive, which drove the Wehrmacht out of central Ukraine, unfortunately the General Squadron was not really that used. They were re-equipped with Ju-87Gs, which they didn't really do a lot with, since the Ju-87G wasn't very good, so he ended up not really doing anything. But it's still a cool insignia to have, and also kind of fits with the theme of at least the main aircraft of the Battle Pass. Now, what's interesting about the Australian emblem, or the Australian squadron, is it seems like a bunch of different nations used the 450th name, so the 450th squadron. You know, US used it for a bunch of stuff, and also the UK, also Australia themselves, but this one is for the specific squadron of the Royal Australian Air Force, being the number 450. This one was established and operated in World War II as well. It was active between 1941 and 1945. This was a fighter and fighter-bomber squadron of the Royal Australian Air Force. They were known as the Desert Harassers, which I think is pretty cool. But generally what they actually used, they used Hawker Hurricanes, they used some Kitty Hawks, and also Mustangs by the end of the war. These guys also were used all over the place, including the Middle East and North Africa mainly, but also had some tours in Europe. So these guys were all over the place when it came to what they actually did. Mainly used in places like Syria as well, which is pretty interesting. But yeah, a pretty cool squadron, and also nice to see represented in War Thunder. Now, the Americans get a decal for a squadron that is still actually in active service. This is the 15th Attack Squadron, and these guys have actually gone through a bunch of different emblems. They've gone through at least 4, and the one that we're getting is the Heritage emblem, so it kind of represents, you know, the old times. This Attack Squadron was actually active during the First World War from 1917 to 1919. It was also activated in the 20s, and also from 1928 to 1946, and it's one of those which is been generally used nearly every year since 1917. There's a few years it had off, such as the year of 1950, it wasn't active, but the vast majority of them, it has been going all the time. And this one is just one right now, which actually uses drones, funny enough. It uses the General Atomics MQ-9 Reaper, the remotely piloted attack aircraft, which is kind of cool. But also, its nicknames, so it's known as Pigeons now, but it used to be known as Cotton Pickers, which is a little bit rough, and guess what was changed to, of course, Pigeons. But it was used during the Second World War, which is probably where it generally is looked for. It also used post-World War II stuff like shooting stars, sabers. They did some tactical reconnaissance stuff. They even used some reconnaissance aircraft such as the Voodoo, the RF-101 variant, which is quite interesting. So what we're having a look at this squad is mainly we're looking at recon post-World War II, and even during World War II. It was used as an observation squadron in general. So this squadron is really interesting. Basically, it uses a lot of variants of aircraft that we're never really going to see into game, which is the R variants, the recon variants, such as the RF-84F, you know, the RF-4C, which is the recon variant of the F-4C Phantom. But it's still really interesting, you know. These guys are something which, you know, you don't normally hear about when it comes to games like War Thunder, since they are more reconnaissance-based. But still, at the end of the day, they have really cool insignias, and it's really cool to see them represented too. The last one is for the Soviets, and it's for the USSR Watchdog decal, or at least that's what it's known as. I don't entirely know where this is from. I don't know which squadron it is from. I know a lot of squadrons in the USSR used an angry dog or similar stuff such as like angry tigers or wolves and stuff as insignias, so it probably comes from one of them. But if you do have more information about this insignia or emblem, it would be really nice to hear it, to see where this one is from. But yeah, the last one out of the 4 decals is an interesting Soviet one. There's a bunch of decorators as well, which are all really cool, and some for tanks, some for ships, but mainly for tanks. The first one for tanks is actually the UBT. Now, the UBT is just a gun with a pintle, basically, and this looks like it's the Berezin UB, but for tanks. So the 12.7mm caliber Soviet aircraft machine gun, just designed for tank use with a mount on it. So that's pretty cool. You know, you can add an extra gun onto your tank, I suppose, to try and scare the enemy, which I think is quite nice. The next one is a bomb cassette for tanks as well. Now, a bomb cassette is basically a way of being able to safely transport bombs when it comes to moving them around the place, being able to put them into positions and get them onto planes and stuff like that. The bomb cassette was the way of being able to transport them. So yeah, I think that was pretty cool. I don't know what size the bombs are. They kind of look small because there's a lot of them packed in there, but who knows? They could really be anything. The next one's probably the most interesting one, and it's for ships, and it is a mortar. And this is a stationary mortar. You can see it's actually sat on what looks like a slab of concrete, so it looks like it's not moving anywhere. But this thing, the name of it in the files is the Decals Skoda Morza M16. Now, I think this refers to, obviously, the Skoda, but a specific variant of it. There was a Skoda 100mm model 1916, which would be the closest to this. Now, if you don't know what the Skodas are, obviously, you know, it's a name of a company or a brand, but the Skoda is kind of known as some of the more, the siege howitzers, basically, is the way to put them. So, in 1911, they made the Skoda 305mm, which was just this absolutely behemoth of a siege howitzer, and then also made some other models during the First World War, such as as I said, the Model 1916 and Model 1916 or Model 1619. Both of these were used post World War II, post First World War, and also some during the First World War, with the Model 1619 used from 1919 and the 1916 used from 1916 to 1945. These were mainly used by Axis powers, but not entirely. Poland also used these, which is pretty cool. And they're 100mm in caliber, and obviously has a decent rate of fire of 5. So that was pretty good for mortars at the time. The main differences between the older ones, the larger 305mm and the 100mm, is the actual ability to be able to move with them, put them on wheels and stuff like that, so you could actually move them around instead of train tracks, which would have been a bit of a problem. Then you have a last decoration, which is the decor Chinese lamp, but unfortunately this isn't shown. So I wonder if this will actually be able to give light or not. That would be kind of interesting to see, but we'll have to see going forward. We haven't seen anything like that before, so it would be weird if it happened now. There is also a profile picture in the files, which is the Cardicon Assault one, and this is obviously of an Su-8 pilot looking very jolly and ready to go. And I think this one looks really nice. The first Battle Pass really blew it out of the water doing the generals, so any of the ones afterwards have always felt a little bit down. But as a person who likes collecting things, I always enjoy getting these ones, so I'm completely fine with it. It's nice to see. And there's also a new loading screen for the Su-8, so we're going to have to see what that looks like, and it looks like it will continue as the level 100 reward. That's all the stuff from the Battle Pass Datamine. There's a few other things about some renaming of stuff in the game, which we'll get into when it comes to some other changelogs. But as always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Professor X 1718, Orange Tail, Sakoshi Tiger, BRFC 15,
Teddy, John Ryman, Universe A, Eugens Terry, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, and then Kyle Kin, Barine, Lafouche, and also Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.